The radio crackled with urgent voices in 3 different languages as Sergeant Sofia Petrov pressed herself against the concrete wall. Her thick Eastern European accent, now the only thing standing between a successful mission and certain death. What her fellow soldiers had mocked for months was about to save hundreds of lives, if she could just make it through the next 60 seconds alive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 months earlier, the pre-dawn mist clung to Fort Blackwater Military Base like a shroud, the kind of mourning that made everything feel muffled and distant. Sergeant Sofia Petrov walked across the compound with measured steps, her combat boots creating a steady rhythm against the wet asphalt. In her hands, she carried a thick folder containing intelligence reports written in 6 different languages: Arabic, Farsi, Russian, Mandarin, Spanish, and English, each one meticulously translated and annotated with cultural context that most analysts overlooked. Sofia had always been different, and not just because of the pronounced accent that colored every word she spoke. While other soldiers focused on weapons training and tactical maneuvers, she immersed herself in the intricate patterns of language, the subtle differences in dialect that could reveal an enemy's origin, education level, and even emotional state. Her fellow soldiers saw her thick accent as a weakness, a reminder that she wasn't truly one of them. What they failed to understand was that this same accent was her gateway into understanding dozens of others. She'd arrived at Fort Blackwater 8 months ago, transferred from a linguistics unit where her unique abilities had been appreciated, if not fully utilized. The daughter of Romanian immigrants, Sofia had grown up navigating between world-speaking Romanian at home with her grandmother, English at school with her classmates, and learning additional languages with the voracious appetite of someone who understood that communication was power. Her grandmother, who had survived World War II by speaking German to Nazi officers while secretly helping Allied forces, had taught Sofia that sometimes the most dangerous weapon wasn't a gun, it was the ability to become invisible by sounding like you belonged. But Fort Blackwater was different. This was a combat-focused base where soldiers prided themselves on direct action and clear communication. Sofia's accent, which carried the rolling R's and softened consonants of her heritage, marked her as an outsider from the moment she introduced herself. During her first week, she'd watched fellow soldiers exchange glances when she spoke, seen the barely concealed smirks when she mispronounced certain English words, felt the immediate dismissal of her expertise simply because she didn't sound like them. The intelligence division where Sofia worked was housed in a converted hangar filled with computer stations, radio equipment, and walls covered in maps marked with red pins indicating areas of interest. Her desk was positioned in the back corner, away from the main action, where she spent her days monitoring communications intercepts and producing detailed linguistic analysis that rarely made it beyond her immediate supervisor's desk. Captain Marcus Webb, the division commander, was a career military man who believed in efficiency and standardization. He'd made it clear during Sofia's orientation that while her language skills were useful, the unit's primary focus was on actionable intelligence, not academic language studies. Webb spoke with the crisp precision of someone who'd never questioned whether his way of communicating was the only correct way, and he showed little patience for Sofia's detailed cultural analyses that accompanied her translations. "Petrov," he'd said during her second week, "we need translations, not dissertations. Keep it simple and keep it fast." Sofia had nodded respectfully, but inside she felt the familiar sting of being reduced to a simple tool rather than recognized as an expert. Her translations were always accurate and delivered on time, but the cultural context she provided, the subtle implications of word choice, the regional variations that could indicate an enemy's location, the emotional undertones that might reveal strategic intentions, was consistently overlooked in favor of more straightforward intelligence. The other soldiers in her unit weren't overtly hostile, but their casual dismissal was perhaps worse than Outright antagonism. Corporal Jake Morrison, a communications specialist who sat 2 desks away, had taken to imitating her accent during breaks, exaggerating her pronunciation for the entertainment of others. Lieutenant Zara Hassan, the unit's senior analyst, was polite but distant, treating Sofia more like a specialized piece of equipment than a colleague with valuable insights. It was during a routine morning briefing that Sofia's status as an outsider was crystallized into something more painful than simple professional dismissal. Captain Webb was reviewing intercepts from the previous day when he came to one of Sofia's reports about communications between insurgent cells in the Kavistan region. She'd identified subtle variations in Arabic dialects that suggested the involvement of fighters from at least 3 different countries, information that could be crucial for understanding enemy capabilities and planning countermeasures. "This report from Sergeant Petrov," Webb said, holding up her analysis, "contains some interesting language observations, but let's focus on the actionable intelligence." He skipped over her detailed analysis of dialect variations and cultural implications, jumping directly to the basic translation of what the intercepted communication said, not what they revealed about who was saying it. After the briefing, Sofia approached Webb's desk with additional analysis she'd prepared. "Sir, about the Kavistan intercepts," she began, her accent more pronounced when she was nervous. "The dialect pattern suggests these aren't local fighters. The way they structure their sentences, the specific religious references they use." "Petrov," Webb interrupted, "I appreciate your thoroughness, but we're running military operations here, not linguistic seminars. We need clear, concise intelligence that our field commanders can use immediately." Sofia felt her cheeks burn with frustration. "But sir, understanding who we're fighting is just as important as understanding what they're planning. These dialect differences could help us predict their tactics, identify their leadership structure." "Look," Webb said, his tone becoming more patronizing, "your English is improving and your basic translations are adequate. But when you start adding all these theoretical interpretations, it just muddies the water. Keep it simple, soldier." The dismissal was complete and devastating. Sofia's accent, which Webb clearly viewed as evidence of limited English comprehension, had become the lens through which all her expertise was filtered. Her years of advanced linguistic training, her master's degree in applied linguistics, her specialized certification in intelligence analysis, none of it mattered because she didn't sound American enough to be taken seriously. As Sofia returned to her desk, she caught Corporal Morrison mimicking her interaction with Webb for the amusement of several other soldiers. "Keep it simple, soldier," he said in an exaggerated version of her accent, causing the group to erupt in laughter. The mockery stung not just because it was cruel, but because it reduced her years of expertise to a source of entertainment. Lieutenant Hassan observed the scene from her desk, her expression unreadable. Unlike the others, she never participated in the mockery, but she never defended Sofia either. In the military hierarchy of Fort Blackwater, maintaining neutrality was often safer than standing up for someone who'd already been marked as different. Sofia spent the rest of that day working on routine translations, her detailed cultural analyses kept to herself. As the hours passed, she found herself questioning everything: her decision to join the military, her belief that her unique skills could make a difference, even her grandmother's stories about the power of language in wartime. Maybe Webb was right. Maybe her accent was a liability, her detailed analysis unnecessary complication in a world that valued speed and simplicity over depth and understanding. That evening, Sofia sat in her small base quarters, surrounded by language textbooks and cultural studies materials that she'd brought from her previous assignment. On her desk lay a photo of her grandmother, taken just months before she passed away, showing an elderly woman whose eyes held the wisdom of someone who'd survived by adapting, by becoming whatever the situation required. Her grandmother had told her stories about the war, about how she'd used her ability to speak German without an accent to gather intelligence for Allied forces, how she'd convinced Nazi officers that she was a loyal supporter while secretly documenting their movements. "Sofia," she'd said during one of their last conversations, "your voice is not a weakness because it sounds different. Your voice is powerful because it can sound like anyone's when it needs to." As Sofia stared at the photograph, she made a decision. She wouldn't let the mockery and dismissal change who she was or diminish her commitment to her work. Her accent might mark her as different, but her skills were real, her analysis was valuable, and someday, somehow, she would prove that her unique perspective was exactly what the military needed, even if they didn't know it yet. Outside her window, Fort Blackwater settled into the quiet routines of evening, unaware that its most undervalued soldier was preparing for a moment that would change everything, a moment when being different would become the most valuable asset of all. The following morning brought no relief from the previous day's humiliation. Sofia arrived at the intelligence division to find her desk covered with printed screenshots of online translation tools, each one showing hilariously incorrect translations between English and various foreign languages. A sticky note attached to her computer monitor read, "In case you need backup," in Corporal Morrison's handwriting, followed by a crude smiley face. Sofia quietly removed the papers and settled into her work, but the message was clear. Her colleagues weren't just dismissing her expertise, they were actively undermining it. As she powered up her computer and reviewed the overnight intelligence reports, she could hear Morrison regaling a small group with an exaggerated story about her interaction with Captain Webb the day before. "So there she is," Morrison said, his voice carrying across the room, telling the captain about dialect variations and cultural implications, sounding like she's reading from a college textbook with that thick accent of hers. Meanwhile, Webb's just standing there thinking, "Can someone please translate what she's trying to say?" The laughter that followed felt like a physical blow. Sofia kept her eyes focused on her screen, parsing through intercepted communications that had come in during the night shift. 3 separate conversations in Arabic, 2 in Farsi, and 1 multi-party exchange that switched between Russian and what sounded like a Chechen dialect. The complexity of the linguistic patterns immediately caught her attention, but she knew better than to interrupt the ongoing entertainment at her expense. Captain Webb entered the division area at precisely 800 hours, as was his habit. His morning briefings were legendary for their efficiency. No wasted words, no unnecessary analysis, just the facts as he saw them. Sofia gathered her overnight analysis reports, hoping that perhaps today would be different, that her insights might be given proper consideration. "Good morning, people," Webb announced, taking his position at the front of the room. "Let's keep this brief. We've got 3 priority intercepts from overnight that need immediate attention." Sofia raised her hand tentatively. "Sir, about those intercepts, I've identified some concerning patterns that might indicate..." "Petrov," Webb cut her off with barely concealed irritation. "Let's start with the basics. What did they say, not what you think they meant?" The dismissal was swift and public, causing several soldiers to exchange knowing glances. Sofia felt her face flush, but she maintained her professional composure. "Yes, sir." The first intercept, approximately 0200 hours, discussed movement of supplies through the northern corridor. The speakers used specific terminology that suggests, "Just the translation, Sergeant," Webb interrupted again. "Save the analysis for later." Sofia proceeded to deliver straightforward translations of the 3 intercepts, stripping away all the cultural context and linguistic nuances that could provide crucial intelligence about enemy operations. As she spoke, she could see Webb's attention drifting, his focus already moving to other priorities. When she finished, he simply nodded and moved on to other business without any questions about the details she'd been forced to omit. During the coffee break that followed the briefing, Sofia found herself isolated in the break room while other soldiers clustered in animated conversation about weekend plans and upcoming leaves. She was reviewing her notes when Morrison approached with what appeared to be a friendly smile. "Hey, Petrov," he said, pulling up a chair. "I've been thinking about your situation." Sofia looked up cautiously. "My situation?" "Well, you know, the communication thing. Maybe if you worked on sounding more American, people might take your ideas more seriously." Morrison's tone was conversational, almost helpful, but there was an underlying condescension that made Sofia's skin crawl. "I don't understand," Sofia replied, though she understood perfectly. "Look, I'm trying to help you here," Morrison continued. "You're obviously smart, and your translations are decent. But when you talk with that heavy accent, people focus on how you sound instead of what you're saying. Maybe you could take some speech classes or something." The suggestion was delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who genuinely believed he was offering constructive advice. Sofia felt a familiar mixture of anger and humiliation rise in her chest. Her accent wasn't a speech impediment or a lack of education. It was part of her identity, connected to her family's history and her grandmother's legacy. "Thank you for the suggestion," Sofia said carefully. "But I believe my communication skills are adequate for my duties." Morrison shrugged. "Suit yourself. Just don't expect people to take you seriously if you sound like you're reading from a foreign language textbook." As Morrison walked away, Sofia caught sight of Lieutenant Hassan watching the interaction from across the room. For a moment, their eyes met, and Sofia thought she saw something like sympathy in Hassan's expression. But when Sofia offered a tentative smile, Hassan simply looked away and rejoined her conversation with other officers. The afternoon brought a new humiliation. During a routine analysis session, Sofia was presenting her assessment of communication patterns between insurgent cells when her computer's translation software malfunctioned, producing a garbled audio output that mixed her accent with electronic distortion. The result was an incomprehensible jumble of words that sent the room into barely controlled laughter. "Maybe we should get you a voice coach along with that speech therapy," Morrison called out, causing another wave of chuckles. Captain Webb, who had been reviewing other reports during Sofia's presentation, looked up with obvious annoyance. "Technical difficulty, Sergeant." "Yes, sir." "Software malfunction." "I can continue without the audio if—" "Just submit a written report," Webb said dismissively. "We don't have time for equipment problems." Sofia gathered her materials and returned to her desk, feeling the weight of yet another professional defeat. As she compiled her written report, she couldn't help but notice how much more detailed and insightful her analysis became when she wasn't constrained by the need to deliver it verbally in front of people who were more focused on her accent than her expertise. Her written assessment identified 3 distinct communication networks operating in the region, each with different linguistic fingerprints that suggested different levels of training, education, and strategic sophistication. She detected subtle code words and cultural references that indicated possible connections to international terrorist organizations, information that could be crucial for understanding the scope and nature of the threat facing American forces. As Sofia submitted her report through the standard channels, she knew it would likely be skimmed for basic translation content and filed away without the detailed consideration it deserved. Her insights about enemy organization, her analysis of communication patterns, her assessment of strategic implications, all of it would be reduced to a few bullet points in someone else's summary report. That evening, Sofia called her cousin, Maria, who lived in Chicago and worked as a translator for international business conferences. Maria had faced similar challenges in the corporate world, where clients sometimes questioned her abilities based on her accent, despite her flawless technical translations. "They don't understand," Maria told her during their video call, "that having an accent doesn't mean you're less intelligent or less capable. It means you're multilingual, which is actually more impressive than being monolingual." "I know that," Sofia replied, but knowing it and feeling it are different things. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake joining the military. Maybe I should have stayed in academia where linguistic diversity is more valued. Don't let them make you doubt yourself, Maria said firmly. Your skills are valuable, whether they recognize it or not. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being excellent at what you do until they can't ignore you anymore. As Sofia ended the call and prepared for another day of professional invisibility, she held on to her cousin's words and her grandmother's stories. Somewhere in the intelligence flowing through Fort Blackwater was information that would require exactly her unique combination of skills: linguistic expertise, cultural understanding, and the ability to hear what others missed. She just had to be ready when that moment arrived. The incident that would cement Sofia's reputation as the unit's outsider happened on a Tuesday morning during what should have been a routine intelligence review. Major David Chun, the base's senior intelligence officer, had arrived from headquarters for a quarterly assessment of the division's capabilities. His visit was supposed to be a formal evaluation, but it quickly became an impromptu demonstration of everything that was wrong with how Sofia's expertise was being utilized. Major Chun, a sharp-eyed officer with an impressive background in military intelligence, had specifically requested to review the unit's handling of multilingual intercepts. Captain Webb, eager to impress his superior, had prepared a presentation showcasing the division's efficiency in processing foreign language communications. What he hadn't prepared for was Chun's detailed questions about linguistic analysis and cultural context. Captain Webb, Chun said, reviewing a stack of translated intercepts. These translations are technically accurate, but they're missing crucial interpretive elements. Who's doing your cultural analysis? Webb gestured toward Sofia's corner desk. Sergeant Petrov handles our foreign language materials. She's thorough. The way Webb said thorough made it sound like a character flaw rather than a professional strength. Sofia felt all eyes in the room turn toward her as Major Chun approached her workstation, his expression curious and evaluative. Sergeant Petrov, Chun said, reviewing the reports scattered across her desk. I see you've been tracking communication patterns across multiple language groups. Tell me about this analysis. Sofia glanced nervously at Captain Webb, who nodded with obvious reluctance. This was her moment to demonstrate her expertise, but she was acutely aware that every word would be scrutinized not just for content, but for the way she delivered it. Sir, I've been monitoring 6 distinct communication networks operating in the Kavistan region. Sofia began, her accent immediately noticeable in the quiet room. Each network uses different linguistic patterns that reveal information about their structure, training, and possible international connections. Major Chun leaned forward with genuine interest. Elaborate on that, Sergeant. Sofia felt a surge of professional excitement. Finally, someone wanted to hear her detailed analysis. For example, Network Alpha uses classical Arabic with specific religious terminology that suggests the speakers received formal religious education, possibly in Pakistan or Afghanistan. Network Beta uses colloquial Arabic mixed with Farsi loanwords, indicating fighters from border regions, but Network Gamma. Sofia paused, pulling up her most detailed report. Network Gamma is the most concerning. Why is that? Chun asked. They switch between languages mid-sentence, using Arabic for operational terms, Russian for technical discussions, and Chechen for what appear to be coded references to leadership. This suggests a highly sophisticated, internationally connected organization with operational security protocols that most insurgent groups don't possess. The room had fallen completely silent. Sofia's detailed analysis was unlike anything that had been presented during the formal briefing. She was connecting linguistic patterns to strategic implications, using her expertise to paint a picture of enemy capabilities that went far beyond simple translation. Major Chun studied her reports with growing interest. Have you shared this analysis with your chain of command? Sofia glanced at Captain Webb, whose expression had shifted from reluctance to barely concealed irritation. "I've submitted reports, sir, but the focus has been on direct translation, rather than interpretive analysis." "I see," Chun said, his tone neutral but his meaning clear. He continued reviewing Sofia's work, asking detailed questions about dialect variations, code switching patterns, and cultural references that revealed information about enemy recruitment and training methods. For 20 minutes, Sofia found herself in her element, discussing the intricacies of language analysis with someone who understood its strategic value. She explained how certain pronunciation patterns could indicate a speaker's region of origin, how specific religious references revealed ideological affiliations, and how communication timing and frequency suggested operational planning cycles. As the conversation progressed, Sofia became aware of the growing tension in the room. Her colleagues were watching with expressions that ranged from surprise to resentment. Corporal Morrison was shaking his head with obvious disdain, while other soldiers exchanged glances that clearly communicated their view that Sofia was showing off, using her time with the Major to make the rest of them look inadequate. When Major Chun finally concluded his review, his assessment was unambiguous. "Sergeant Petrov, this is exactly the kind of analysis that should be driving our intelligence priorities. Your work provides strategic insights that basic translation cannot capture." Sofia felt a moment of validation, but it was quickly overshadowed by Captain Webb's response. "Sir, while Sergeant Petrov's detailed approach has merit, we found that streamlined reporting is more effective for operational needs. Complex linguistic analysis can sometimes overcomplicate straightforward intelligence." The dismissal was subtle but clear. Webb was essentially telling his superior that Sofia's expertise was more trouble than it was worth, that her detailed analysis was an unnecessary complication in an efficient operation. That Major Chen's expression remained neutral, but Sofia could see him processing the dynamics at play. "Captain, in my experience, the devil is often in the details that get overlooked in streamlined reporting. But I'll leave operational decisions to your judgment." After Major Chun left, the backlash was swift and merciless. Morrison was the first to voice what others were thinking. "Well, that was quite a performance, Petrov. Did you enjoy making the rest of us look like amateurs?" "I was just answering his questions," Sofia replied quietly. "Right," Morrison said sarcastically. "Just answering questions with your little linguistics lecture. Maybe next time you could tone down the professor act and remember you're a soldier, not a college instructor." Lieutenant Hassan, who had remained silent during the confrontation with Major Chen, finally spoke up. "Morrison, that's enough." "Is it?" Morrison turned to face Hassan. "She just spent 20 minutes making it sound like the rest of us don't know how to do our jobs. All because she can pronounce foreign words with her fancy accent." The irony was devastating. Sofia's accent, which had been mocked as evidence of her inadequacy, was now being criticized as pretentious when it demonstrated her actual expertise. She couldn't win. Her accent made her seem less competent to her colleagues, but her competence made her accent seem like showing off. Captain Webb called Sofia to his office after the division returned to normal operations. His message was clear and uncompromising. "Petrov, while I appreciate your enthusiasm for detailed analysis, I need you to understand that unit cohesion is more important than individual recognition." Major Chun's visit was supposed to showcase our team's capabilities, not highlight any one person's specialized skills. Sofia felt the crushing weight of the impossible position she'd been placed in. She was too foreign to be trusted with important analysis, but too competent to be ignored when senior officers asked direct questions. Her expertise was simultaneously unwanted and essential, dismissed as overcomplicated, but secretly relied upon for accuracy. "I understand, sir," Sofia replied, though she understood something entirely different than what Webb intended. She understood that her place in this unit would always be marginal, that her skills would be tolerated but never celebrated, and that her accent would always mark her as someone who didn't quite belong. That evening, Sofia sat in her quarters with her grandmother's photograph, feeling more isolated than ever. The validation from Major Chun had shown her that her work had real value, but it had also demonstrated how completely that value was dismissed by her immediate colleagues. She was the specialist nobody wanted, the expert whose expertise was seen as a threat to unit harmony rather than an asset to mission success. But deep in her heart, Sofia knew that someday, somehow, the very skills that made her an outsider would become exactly what was needed to save lives. She just had to survive long enough to prove it. The first signs of trouble arrived on a gray Thursday morning in the form of intercepted communications that made Sofia's stomach tighten with recognition. She was reviewing overnight intelligence reports when patterns began emerging from the seemingly random chatter patterns that her colleagues would dismiss as coincidental, but that her trained linguistic instincts recognized as deeply concerning. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 3 separate communication intercepts, captured from different regions across the Kavistan theater, contained linguistic markers that Sofia had been tracking for weeks. The first was in Arabic, discussing supply deliveries, using terminology that sounded commercial but carried subtle military undertones. The second was in Farsi, referencing family gatherings with date and location details that followed the communication patterns Sofia had identified in her analysis of network gamma. The third was in Russian, using Chechen dialectical variations to discuss business opportunities in ways that her cultural knowledge recognized as operational planning language. Individually, each intercept appeared routine, the kind of everyday chatter that intelligence divisions processed by the dozens every day. But Sofia could see the connections that others missed, the linguistic threads that wove these separate conversations into a coordinated communication network. Her hands trembled slightly as she began documenting the patterns, understanding that she was looking at evidence of a major operation in the planning stages. The terminology being used across all 3 languages indicated a level of operational security and international coordination that exceeded anything the intelligence division had previously encountered. These weren't local insurgent cells communicating haphazardly. This was a sophisticated network using advanced communication protocols to coordinate what appeared to be a significant tactical operation. Sofia spent the morning compiling her analysis, cross-referencing the new intercepts with weeks of previous communications she'd been tracking. The picture that emerged was both clear and terrifying. Network Gamma, the sophisticated multilingual organization she'd identified during Major Chen's visit, was preparing to execute a complex operation that would involve coordinated attacks across multiple locations. The planning language suggested a 3-phase operation: initial positioning, target identification, and synchronized execution. Based on the linguistic patterns and cultural references, Sofia estimated they had perhaps 72 hours before the operation moved from planning to implementation. The lives of American personnel and potentially hundreds of civilians were at stake. At 1100 hours, Sofia approached Captain Webb's desk with her comprehensive analysis. Her report detailed the connections between the intercepts, explained the coded language being used, and provided strategic assessments based on linguistic and cultural indicators. It was the kind of detailed intelligence analysis that could prevent a catastrophic terrorist attack if anyone would listen. "Sir," Sofia began, her accent more pronounced due to her nervousness, "I need to brief you on some critical intelligence I've identified in this morning's intercepts." Captain Webb looked up from his paperwork with obvious annoyance. "Petrov, I'm busy. If you have translations, just submit them through normal channels." "Sir, this isn't just translation. I've identified coordinated communication patterns that suggest a major operation is being planned." Based on the linguistic analysis, I believe we have approximately 72 hours before. Sergeant, Webb interrupted, his tone sharp with irritation. How many times do I have to tell you? We need facts, not theories. Submit your translations, and let the analysis team handle strategic assessment. Sofia felt her heart racing. This wasn't about professional recognition or proving her expertise. This was about preventing loss of life. Sir, please, if you would just look at the patterns I've identified. Petrov. Webb's voice carried across the division area, causing other soldiers to look up from their work. I've been patient with your tendency to overcomplicate simple intelligence, but this is getting ridiculous. You're a translator, not a strategic analyst. Do your job and stop trying to do everyone else's. The public humiliation was complete and devastating, but Sofia's concern for the lives at stake overcame her embarrassment. Captain, I understand your position, but the linguistic evidence is clear. These communications are using coded language to coordinate a multi-phase operation. The cultural references, the timing patterns, the way they're switching between languages, that's enough. Webb stood up, his face flushed with anger. I don't want to hear another word about your linguistic theories or cultural interpretations. Submit standard translation reports and focus on your actual duties. Sofia felt tears of frustration threatening, but she maintained her composure. Sir, what if I'm right? What if people die because we ignored intelligence that could have prevented an attack? Webb's expression softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. Petrov, I appreciate your dedication, but you're seeing patterns that aren't there. These intercepts show routine communication between insurgent cells. Nothing more, nothing less. File your translations and move on. As Sofia returned to her desk, she could feel the eyes of her colleagues following her. Morrison was shaking, his head with obvious disdain, while others exchanged glances that clearly communicated their view that she had once again overstepped her boundaries. The specialist nobody wanted had just proven why nobody wanted her. She couldn't stay in her lane, but Sofia knew what she had seen in those communications. The patterns were too consistent, too sophisticated, too coordinated to be coincidental. Network Gamma was preparing to execute an operation that would catch American forces completely off guard, and she was the only person who could see it coming. Lieutenant Hassan approached Sofia's desk during the afternoon lull, her expression carefully neutral. Sofia, she said quietly, maybe you should consider that the captain might be right. Sometimes patterns aren't as significant as they seem. Sofia looked up at Hassan, seeing not malice but genuine concern. Hassan was trying to protect her from further humiliation, trying to help her understand that her insistence on complex analysis was damaging her standing in the unit. But Sofia also saw something else in Hassan's eyes: uncertainty. Hassan wasn't completely convinced that Sofia was wrong. She just knew that being right wouldn't matter if nobody would listen. Zara, Sofia said quietly, using Hassan's first name for the first time. What if I'm right? What if there's an attack and we could have prevented it? Hassan glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard. Then you submit your analysis through official channels and let higher-ups make the decision. But you need to stop pushing Webb. He's already decided you're a problem, and continuing to argue will only make things worse for you. Sofia nodded, understanding Hassan's practical advice, but knowing she couldn't simply file her report and hope someone else would recognize its significance. The linguistic evidence was too clear, the threat too imminent, and the potential consequences too devastating. That evening, Sofia worked late into the night, refining her analysis and documenting every detail of the communication pattern she'd identified. If something happened when something happened, she wanted to ensure that the intelligence was available for others to learn from, even if it was too late to prevent the attack itself. As she sat alone in the empty intelligence division, surrounded by translations and cultural analyses that nobody wanted to read. Sofia felt the weight of knowledge that nobody would accept. She was holding information that could save lives, but her accent, her outsider status, and her reputation for overcomplication had rendered her expertise worthless in the eyes of those who needed to hear it. The crisis was emerging, and Sofia was the only one who could see it coming. But being right wouldn't matter if she remained voiceless, and being voiceless was exactly what her accent and outsider status had made her in the rigid hierarchy of Fort Blackwater. 57 hours after Sofia's dismissed warning, the intercepts exploded into urgent reality. At 0347 hours on Saturday morning, Sofia was awakened by the base-wide alarm system, its piercing wail cutting through the pre-dawn darkness like a knife. Emergency lights bathed Fort Blackwater in an eerie red glow as soldiers scrambled to their positions, the comfortable routine of base life shattered by the kind of crisis that transforms everything in an instant. Sofia threw on her uniform and raced to the intelligence division, her heart pounding with a sickening mixture of vindication and dread. The pattern she'd identified, the coordinated communications that Captain Webb had dismissed as routine chatter, had materialized into exactly the kind of sophisticated attack she'd predicted. Network Gamma had executed the first phase of their operation with devastating precision. The intelligence center was in chaos. Officers shouted into radios, computer screens displayed tactical maps covered in red threat indicators, and the air crackled with the urgent energy of a military organization responding to an active crisis. Captain Webb stood at the center of the storm, his usually composed demeanor replaced by the controlled panic of a commander who had been caught completely off guard. Status report. Webb barked as officers filed into the emergency briefing area. Lieutenant Hassan, who had been on night duty when the crisis began, delivered the initial assessment with grim efficiency. At 0330 hours, coordinated attacks struck 3 separate locations across the Kavistan region. Forward Operating Base Alpha, Supply Depot Charlie, and the Civilian Evacuation Center in Khazari Village. Early reports indicate significant casualties and strategic asset losses. Sofia felt her stomach drop. The locations matched exactly the geographical references she'd identified in the coded communications, the family gathering locations that had been dismissed as routine insurgent chatter. The timing corresponded to the operational schedule she'd calculated, based on linguistic patterns that nobody had wanted to hear about. Colonel Elena Vasquez, the base commander, entered the briefing room with the purposeful stride of a leader, facing the most serious crisis of her command. Her presence immediately commanded attention, and the chaotic energy of the room focused into disciplined urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vasquez announced, her voice cutting through the ambient noise, "we are facing a coordinated terrorist operation of unprecedented sophistication. Intelligence suggests that this was planned and executed by an international network with advanced operational security protocols." Sofia wanted to scream. She had identified Network Gamma weeks ago, had documented their communication patterns, had warned about their sophisticated coordination. But her voice had been dismissed as the overcomplicated theories of a translator who didn't understand her place in the military hierarchy. Webb continued the briefing with updates from field commanders. The attacks appear to be the first phase of a larger operation. Intelligence indicates the terrorist network is planning additional strikes, but we've lost contact with several forward reconnaissance teams. Our primary concern is the 18 American personnel currently trapped behind enemy lines in the Khazari sector. The room fell silent. 18 American soldiers, cut off from support, facing an enemy that had demonstrated sophisticated planning and coordination. Sofia knew from her analysis of Network Gamma's communications that these weren't simple insurgents. They were trained operatives with international backing and advanced tactical capabilities. "Sir," Lieutenant Hassan spoke up, her voice careful, but determined, "what's our extraction plan?" Colonel Vasquez exchanged glances with Webb before responding. "That's our primary challenge. The enemy has established sophisticated communication protocols that we can't penetrate. They're using multiple languages, coded references, and communication patterns that our standard intelligence analysis can't decode quickly enough to predict their movements." Sofia felt her heart racing. This was exactly the situation she'd been training for her entire career, a crisis where linguistic expertise and cultural understanding could mean the difference between life and death. But she also knew that her previous attempts to share her analysis had been met with dismissal and humiliation. Major Chun, who had arrived from headquarters on an emergency flight, joined the briefing with additional intelligence from higher command. The terrorist network is using a communication system that switches between Arabic, Farsi, Russian, and what appears to be several regional dialects. They're coordinating in real time, adjusting their tactics based on our responses. We need to understand their communication patterns if we're going to extract our people alive. The irony was devastating. The exact expertise that Sofia had been developing, the multilingual analysis that had been dismissed as overcomplication, was now the key to saving American lives. She could decode their communication patterns, predict their tactical adjustments, and provide the intelligence needed for a successful extraction operation. Captain Webb, clearly feeling the pressure of command during his first major crisis, struggled to develop a response plan. "We'll monitor their communications and attempt to decode their operational patterns using standard intelligence protocols." Sofia knew that standard protocols would be useless against Network Gamma's sophisticated communication security. She had spent weeks learning their patterns, understanding their coded references, recognizing the subtle linguistic markers that revealed their strategic thinking. Without her expertise, the extraction mission would be operating blind against an enemy that could adapt faster than conventional intelligence could track. Colonel Vasquez reviewed the tactical situation with growing concern. "Major Chun, what's your assessment of our intelligence capabilities against this network?" "Ma'am, this is unlike anything we've encountered. Their communication security is more sophisticated than most state-level operations. They're using cultural references and linguistic patterns that require deep expertise to decode. Without that level of understanding, we're essentially guessing about their intentions and capabilities." Sofia felt the moment crystallizing around her. 18 American soldiers were trapped behind enemy lines, facing an enemy whose communication patterns she could decode, but nobody would let her analyze. Her accent had made her an outsider. Her detailed analysis had been dismissed as overcomplication, and her expertise had been reduced to basic translation duties. But the lives of 18 soldiers hung in the balance, and Sofia was the only person in the room who could provide the intelligence needed to bring them home safely. The question was whether anyone would finally listen to the specialist nobody had wanted, whether her voice would finally be heard over the prejudice that had silenced her expertise. Colonel Vasquez was reviewing tactical options when Sofia made the decision that would change everything. Standing up from her position in the back of the room, she spoke with quiet determination that cut through the urgent discussions around her. "Colonel, I can decode their communications." The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward Sofia, the foreign-accented translator who had been relegated to the margins of every discussion, who had been dismissed and mocked for months. But now, in the moment of greatest crisis, she was offering the expertise that could save 18 American lives. The impossible mission required impossible expertise, and Sofia Petrov was the only person who possessed it. The silence that followed Sofia's declaration stretched for what felt like an eternity. Colonel Vasquez studied her with the calculating gaze of a commander weighing desperate options against institutional prejudice. Every officer in the room understood the stakes: 18 American soldiers trapped behind enemy lines, facing an enemy whose communication patterns had proven impenetrable to conventional intelligence analysis. "Sergeant Petrov," Colonel Vasquez said carefully. Explain what you mean by decode their communications. Sofia felt her mouth go dry, but the lives at stake overcame her fear of professional humiliation. Ma'am, I've been tracking Network Gamma for weeks. They use a sophisticated multi-language communication protocol that switches between Arabic, Farsi, Russian, and Chechen dialects. But it's not random. There are patterns based on operational phases, leadership hierarchy, and tactical priorities. Captain. Webb shifted uncomfortably. Colonel, Sergeant Petrov has a tendency to overanalyze routine communications. I'm not sure this is the time for theoretical, Captain. Colonel Vasquez interrupted, her tone sharp enough to cut steel. 18 of our people are behind enemy lines. Right now I'm interested in any expertise that might bring them home. Alive, continue, Sergeant. Sofia pulled out her tablet, displaying weeks of analysis that had been dismissed as overcomplication. Network Gamma uses Arabic for general operational discussions, but switches to Farsi when discussing timing and logistics. Russian is reserved for technical coordination, and Chechen dialects are used for leadership communications. The code switching isn't random. It follows predictable patterns based on security protocols. Major Chun leaned forward with obvious interest. You're saying you can predict which language they'll use for different types of communications? More than that, sir. I can identify who's speaking based on linguistic patterns, predict their operational priorities based on language choices, and potentially anticipate their tactical movements based on communication timing and frequency. The room buzzed with urgent murmurs. For the first time in months, Sofia's expertise was being treated as valuable rather than problematic. But she could also see the skepticism in several faces, the doubt about whether the foreign-accented translator could really provide intelligence sophisticated enough to save American lives. Colonel Vasquez made the decision with military decisiveness. Sergeant Petrov, you have authorization to monitor and analyze all communications from the Khazari sector. I want real-time intelligence on enemy movements, intentions, and capabilities. Captain Webb, you'll coordinate with Sergeant Petrov to integrate her analysis into our tactical planning. Webb's expression showed barely concealed frustration, but he nodded professionally. Yes, ma'am. Sofia was directed to a specialized monitoring station equipped with the most advanced communication intercept equipment on the base. As she settled into position, she felt the weight of 18 lives resting on her ability to decode the linguistic patterns that others had dismissed as meaningless chatter. The first intercepts came through within minutes. Sofia's trained ear immediately identified the speakers and decoded the operational significance of their language choices. Colonel, she called out, they're using Arabic to discuss movement patterns, but the specific dialectical variations suggest the speakers are from different training backgrounds. I'm hearing at least 3 distinct command structures coordinating the operation. What does that mean tactically? Vasquez asked. It means they're not a unified force, ma'am. They're separate cells working together, which suggests potential communication gaps we could exploit. Also, when they switch to Russian for technical discussions, they're using terminology that indicates Soviet-era training. These aren't just insurgents. Some of these operatives have formal military backgrounds. Lieutenant Hassan, monitoring the tactical situation, looked up with alarm. Sofia, can you determine their immediate intentions toward our trapped personnel? Sofia listened intently to the ongoing communications, her linguistic training allowing her to catch nuances that would be lost in simple translation. They're planning to move our people to a secondary location within the next 4 hours. The Farsi discussions include references to packages and delivery schedules that correspond to the timing patterns I identified in their previous communications. The intelligence was immediately actionable. Colonel Vasquez began coordinating with field commanders to intercept the enemy movement before the American personnel could be relocated to a more secure position. For the first time in her military career, Sofia's analysis was driving tactical decisions in real time. But the real test came when the enemy communication suddenly shifted to a communication protocol that Sofia had never encountered. The speakers began using a mixture of Chechen and what sounded like coded Arabic, switching between languages in patterns that seemed completely random. "They've changed their communication security," Sofia reported, feeling a moment of panic. "This is a new protocol I haven't seen before." The room tensed. If Sofia couldn't decode the new communication patterns, the rescue operation would be operating blind against an enemy that could adapt their tactics faster than American forces could respond. Sofia closed her eyes and listened with the intensity that her grandmother had taught her, the kind of deep linguistic analysis that required not just technical training, but cultural intuition. Slowly, patterns began emerging from what had seemed like chaos. "It's not random," Sofia said with growing excitement. "They're using Chechen grammatical structures but Arabic vocabulary, with Russian technical terms embedded in specific syntactic positions. It's actually more systematic than their previous protocol. They're following grammatical rules that are predictable once you understand the underlying structure." Major Chun looked amazed. "You're saying you can decode a communication protocol you've never seen before?" "Yes, sir. Language follows patterns, even when those patterns are artificially constructed for security purposes. My grandmother taught me that people can't completely escape their linguistic heritage, even when they're trying to hide it." Sofia began providing real-time translation and analysis of the new communication protocol. Her linguistic expertise allowed her to identify not just what the enemy was saying, but how their communication patterns revealed their tactical thinking, their leadership hierarchy, and their operational vulnerabilities. Within 2 hours, Sofia had cracked the enemy's communication security so completely that American forces were essentially listening to their tactical planning in real time. Her analysis revealed the location where the American personnel were being held, the timing of planned movement operations, and the specific vulnerabilities in enemy positioning that could be exploited for a successful rescue. "Outstanding work, Sergeant," Colonel Vasquez said as the rescue operation began to take shape. "Your analysis has given us tactical advantages I didn't think were possible." Sofia felt a surge of professional satisfaction, but also intense pressure. 18 American lives depended on the accuracy of her linguistic analysis, and any mistake in her interpretation of enemy communications could result in a failed rescue operation. The specialist nobody had wanted was now the person everyone was counting on to bring their people home safely. As the rescue operation moved into its active phase, Sofia remained at her monitoring station, providing continuous intelligence updates based on her real-time analysis of enemy communications. Her accent, which had been mocked for months, was now the key to understanding an enemy that spoke in multiple languages and dialects. For the first time since arriving at Fort Blackwater, Sofia's unique expertise wasn't just valued, it was essential. The lives of 18 soldiers depended on her ability to decode linguistic patterns that no one else could understand. And Sofia was determined to prove that being different wasn't a weakness. It was exactly the strength that would bring everyone home alive. At 13:47 hours, with the rescue operation entering its most critical phase, Sofia made the discovery that would transform the entire mission. She had been monitoring enemy communications for 6 straight hours, her linguistic expertise providing real-time intelligence that had already prevented 2 ambushes and identified 3 tactical opportunities for the rescue team. But what she heard in the latest intercept made her heart race with a mixture of excitement and terror. "Colonel," Sofia called out urgently, her voice cutting through the tense atmosphere of the command center. "I've intercepted communications about a high-value target. They're not just holding our 18 personnel. They've captured Major Williams from the 82nd Airborne." The command center fell silent. Major Williams was one of the most decorated intelligence officers in the theater. responsible for coordinating anti-terrorism operations across the entire region. His capture represented a catastrophic intelligence breach that could compromise ongoing operations and endanger hundreds of additional American personnel. Colonel Vasquez moved to Sofia's station with urgent strides. "Are you certain, Sergeant?" Sofia pointed to her analysis on the screen, showing the linguistic patterns that had revealed this crucial intelligence. "Ma'am, they're using specific honorific terms in Arabic that indicate respect for a high-ranking prisoner. The Chechen communications include references to the prize and Moscow's interest, suggesting international intelligence value. When they switch to Russian, they use military terminology that corresponds to interrogation protocols for senior officers." Major Chun, who had been coordinating with Pentagon intelligence, looked grim. If Major Williams is in enemy hands, this operation just became exponentially more complex. He has access to classified information that could compromise operations across 3 countries. Sofia continued monitoring the communications, her expertise allowing her to track multiple conversation threads simultaneously. "Colonel, they're planning to move Major Williams to a separate location within the next 2 hours. The linguistic pattern suggests this move is being coordinated by someone with significant authority, possibly international handlers. The rescue operation, which had been challenging enough with 18 trapped soldiers, now required extracting a high-value intelligence target, whose capture could have strategic implications for the entire war effort." The pressure on Sofia's analysis intensified dramatically, as any mistake in her interpretation could result in the loss of critical intelligence assets. "Sergeant Petrov," Colonel Vasquez said, "I need you to identify their exact extraction timeline and route. Can your analysis determine where they're planning to take Major Williams?" Sofia listened intently to the ongoing communications, using her linguistic training to decode not just the words but the cultural and tactical implications embedded in language choices. "Ma'am, they're using geographic references in Farsi that correspond to locations approximately 40 kilometers northwest of the current position. The timing discussions in Arabic suggest a 3-vehicle convoy departing at sunset, which gives us approximately 90 minutes. Lieutenant Hassan, who had been coordinating tactical communications, looked up with concern. "Sofia, can you determine the security protocols for the convoy? How many guards? What kind of equipment?" "Based on the Russian technical discussions, they're planning heavy security, at least 12 operatives with military-grade equipment. But here's the critical intelligence. They're arguing about route selection. The Arabic-speaking commander wants to use the main highway for speed, but the Russian coordinator is insisting on mountain roads for security. Their communication patterns suggest this disagreement hasn't been resolved." Sofia's analysis was providing exactly the kind of detailed intelligence that conventional intercept methods could never capture. Her ability to understand not just the content of enemy communications, but the cultural and tactical implications of their language choices, was giving American forces unprecedented insight into enemy planning and decision-making. Major Chun coordinated with the tactical team to develop multiple intervention scenarios based on Sofia's intelligence. "Sergeant, we need continuous updates on their route decision. Can you monitor their communications and provide real-time updates as the convoy situation develops?" "Yes, sir. I'll track all communication channels and provide immediate alerts about any changes in their plans." As the rescue operation moved into its final phase, Sofia found herself at the center of a complex military operation where her linguistic expertise was driving tactical decisions in real time. Officers who had dismissed her analysis for months were now hanging on every word of her communication intercepts, understanding that her unique skills were the key to mission success. But the most dramatic moment came when Sofia intercepted communication that revealed something no one had expected. As she listened to a conversation between enemy commanders, she heard Major Williams himself speaking in fluent Arabic, apparently attempting to negotiate with his captors. "Colonel," Sofia said with barely controlled excitement, "Major Williams is alive and actively communicating with his captors. But here's the crucial intelligence. He's using specific Arabic phrases that indicate he's trying to provide us with intelligence about his situation." "What kind of intelligence?" Vasquez asked. Sofia analyzed the linguistic patterns in Williams' speech, recognizing that the major was using his own language skills to embed tactical information in his apparent cooperation with enemy forces. He's describing his location using Arabic terms that include geographic markers. He's telling them about American capabilities, but he's using specific terminology that actually provides us with intelligence about enemy positions and capabilities. The revelation was stunning. Major Williams wasn't just a captured intelligence officer, he was actively conducting counterintelligence operations from within enemy custody, using his own linguistic skills to provide crucial tactical information to potential rescue forces. Sofia's analysis of Williams' communications provided precise location data, intelligence about enemy defensive positions, and detailed information about the facility where the 18 American personnel were being held. Her linguistic expertise allowed her to decode not just enemy communications, but friendly intelligence embedded in those same communications. "Outstanding work, Sergeant," Colonel Vasquez said as the final rescue plans took shape. "Your analysis has transformed this from a blind rescue operation into a coordinated intelligence mission with tactical advantages I didn't think were possible." As the rescue teams moved into position, Sofia remained at her monitoring station, providing continuous intelligence updates based on her real-time analysis of multi-language communications from the target area. Her accent, which had been mocked and dismissed for months, was now the foundation of a complex rescue operation that would determine the fate of 19 American service members and potentially impact the broader strategic situation in the region. The breakthrough had come not through conventional military tactics, but through the linguistic expertise of a foreign-accented translator who had been relegated to the margins of her own intelligence unit. Sofia's unique skills weren't just valuable, they were irreplaceable, and everyone in the command center now understood that her expertise was exactly what they needed to bring their people home safely. The mission was entering its final phase, and Sofia Petrov was no longer the specialist nobody wanted. She was the expert everyone depended on. At 18:21 hours, as the sun began its descent toward the mountainous horizon, Sofia's linguistic expertise guided the most complex rescue operation in Fort Blackwater's history. 3 separate rescue teams had positioned themselves based on her analysis of enemy communications, each team equipped with real-time intelligence updates that only Sofia could provide through her multilingual intercept capabilities. "Bravo team, this is command." Colonel Vasquez spoke into her headset while Sofia monitored enemy communications at the station beside her. "Sergeant Petrov's intelligence indicates the convoy will use the northern route. Adjust positioning accordingly." Sofia felt the weight of 19 lives resting on her ability to decode linguistic patterns in real time. Every communication intercept could reveal changes in enemy planning. Every shift in language choice could indicate tactical adjustments that might compromise the rescue operation. She had never felt more focused, more essential, or more determined to prove that her unique expertise could save American lives. "Colonel," Sofia called out urgently, "they're discussing a change in security protocols. The Russian coordinator is implementing what he calls Moscow procedures for Major Williams. Based on the terminology, this means additional restraints and possibly separation from the other prisoners." Lieutenant Hassan, coordinating tactical communications, immediately relayed this intelligence to the field teams. "All units, be advised that the high-value target may be secured separately from the main group. Adjust breach procedures accordingly." Sofia continued monitoring multiple communication channels simultaneously, her linguistic training allowing her to track conversations in Arabic, Farsi, Russian, and Chechen dialects while identifying the tactical significance of language choices and speaker patterns. It was exactly the kind of complex multilingual analysis that she had been developing for years, but that had been dismissed as overcomplication by her superiors. "Contact in 5 minutes," came the voice of Alpha Team Leader through the radio. "Request final intelligence update on enemy positions and capabilities." Sofia analyzed the most recent intercepts, her expertise allowing her to decode not just the content of enemy communications, but the emotional undertones and stress patterns. That revealed information about their tactical readiness and morale. "Alpha Team, enemy communications indicate high stress levels among the guards. They're arguing about escape routes, which suggests they're not confident about their defensive position. However, the Russian coordinator is implementing disciplined security protocols that suggest formal military training." The tactical intelligence was immediately actionable. Understanding that the enemy was divided between nervous local guards and disciplined international operatives allowed the rescue teams to adjust their approach, targeting the psychological weaknesses while preparing for sophisticated resistance. "Bravo Team moving to position," crackled through the radio. "Sergeant Petrov, can you confirm prisoner locations within the facility?" Sofia listened intently to internal communications from the target building, using her linguistic skills to decode conversations that revealed the physical layout and security arrangements. "Bravo Team, prisoners are being held in 2 separate areas. Main group of 18 personnel is in the eastern section. Major Williams is isolated in what they're calling this special room in the northern section. Based on Arabic terminology, the special room has additional security measures." Major Chun, monitoring the operation from the command center, looked amazed at the level of detailed intelligence Sofia was providing. "Sergeant, this is exactly the kind of tactical intelligence that makes the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure." But the most critical moment came when Sofia intercepted an enemy communication that revealed an imminent threat to the prisoners. "Colonel," she called out with urgent alarm, "they've received orders to execute the prisoners if the facility is breached. The Russian coordinator is implementing what he calls sanitization protocols with a 15-minute timeline." The rescue operation suddenly became a race against time. The teams had 15 minutes to breach the facility, neutralize the guards, and secure 19 American personnel before enemy protocols would result in their execution. Sofia's linguistic expertise had revealed the existence of the execution timeline, but now her continued analysis would be crucial for guiding the teams through the most dangerous phase of the operation. "All teams, execute immediately," Colonel Vasquez ordered. "Sergeant Petrov, we need continuous updates on enemy response and prisoner status." Sofia monitored the communications with intense focus as the rescue operation unfolded in real time. Her linguistic training allowed her to track the panic and confusion among enemy forces as the facility came under attack, providing crucial intelligence about their defensive responses and the status of American personnel. "Alpha Team has breached the eastern section," came the radio report. "Encountering resistance but moving toward prisoner location." "Bravo Team, enemy communications indicate they're attempting to reach the special room," Sofia reported urgently. "The Russian coordinator is giving orders in Chechen dialect that suggests they're prioritizing Major Williams for immediate execution." The intelligence spurred Bravo Team to accelerate their approach to the northern section, understanding that Major Williams faced the most immediate threat. Sofia's ability to decode the enemy's prioritization of targets was providing tactical advantages that conventional intelligence could never capture. "We have visual on the main prisoner group," Alpha Team reported. 18 American personnel confirmed alive and secured. Sofia felt a surge of relief, but she knew the mission wasn't complete until Major Williams was also secured. She continued monitoring communications from the northern section, where enemy resistance was more organized and disciplined. "Bravo team, the Russian coordinator is using technical terminology that suggests he has demolition capabilities," Sofia reported with growing concern. "He's discussing final protocols in Russian military terminology that indicates potential facility destruction. Copy command. Moving fast to prevent any explosive protocols." The next few minutes were the longest of Sofia's career. She listened to fragmented communications as enemy resistance collapsed under the professional assault of American rescue teams, her linguistic expertise allowing her to track the developing tactical situation through the chaos of combat communications. "Command. This is Bravo team. We have Major Williams. Repeat, high-value target is secure and mobile. All prisoners secured," came the final report. 19 American personnel extracted successfully. 0 casualties among friendly forces. The command center erupted in restrained celebration. The rescue operation had succeeded completely, with all 19 American personnel extracted safely, and enemy forces neutralized. Sofia's linguistic expertise had provided the detailed intelligence that made surgical precision possible in what could have been a catastrophic situation. Colonel Vasquez approached Sofia's station with obvious respect and gratitude. "Sergeant Petrov, your analysis made this mission possible. Without your linguistic expertise, we would have been operating blind against an enemy whose communication security was impenetrable to conventional intelligence methods." Sofia felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, but she maintained her professional composure. For the first time in her military career, her expertise had been not just valued but essential to mission success. Her accent, which had been mocked for months, had become the key to saving 19 American lives. The vindication was complete, but more importantly, 19 soldiers were coming home alive because Sofia Petrov had refused to let institutional prejudice silence her expertise when lives were at stake. The debriefing room at Fort Blackwater had never witnessed such a dramatic reversal of professional fortune. As the rescued personnel were processed through medical evaluation and the tactical teams completed their after-action reports, the reality of what had transpired began to settle over the intelligence division. Sofia Petrov, the foreign-accented translator who had been mocked and dismissed for months, had orchestrated the intelligence operation that saved 19 American lives and prevented a strategic intelligence disaster. Captain Webb entered the debriefing room looking like a man who had aged years in a single day. His usual confidence was replaced by the sobering recognition that his dismissal of Sofia's expertise had nearly resulted in catastrophic consequences. When Major Williams had briefed command on the intelligence value of the communications Sofia had been tracking, Webb realized how close his prejudice had come to causing a preventable tragedy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colonel Vasquez began, addressing the assembled intelligence personnel, "today we witnessed exceptional professional performance under extreme pressure. The successful extraction of 19 American personnel was made possible by intelligence analysis of the highest caliber." Sofia sat in the front row, still feeling somewhat surreal about her transformation from departmental outcast to recognized expert. Around her, colleagues who had participated in months of casual mockery now avoided eye contact, their earlier dismissal of her expertise now appearing as professional negligence rather than legitimate skepticism. Major Williams, despite his ordeal, had specifically requested to participate in the debriefing to provide his assessment of Sofia's intelligence analysis. His presence added gravity to the proceedings, as everyone understood that his capture and successful rescue had strategic implications far beyond Fort Blackwater. "Sergeant Petrov's linguistic analysis," Williams said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had experienced the consequences of intelligence failures firsthand, "provided tactical advantages that I didn't think were possible. Her ability to decode enemy communication protocols in real time gave our rescue teams information that conventional intelligence methods could never capture. The Major continued his assessment with detailed specificity that left no room for doubt about Sofia's contributions. During my captivity, I attempted to provide intelligence through my own communications with captors, but it was Sergeant Petrov's linguistic expertise that decoded my embedded tactical information and integrated it into rescue planning. Without her analysis, my attempts at counterintelligence would have been worthless. Corporal Morrison, who had been the most vocal critic of Sofia's detailed analysis, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The photos he had taken of her treasure maps of linguistic patterns, shared as entertainment in the unit's group chat, now looked like documentation of professional expertise that everyone had been too prejudiced to recognize. Lieutenant Hassan stood to address the group, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had witnessed the entire transformation. For the record, Sergeant Petrov warned us about Network Gamma's coordinated operation capabilities weeks before the attack occurred. Her analysis identified the threat patterns that our conventional intelligence methods missed completely. The statement hit the room like a physical blow. Sofia's dismissed warnings hadn't just been vindicated by the successful rescue operation. They had been proven prophetic by the attacks that everyone had failed to prevent. Her overcomplicated analysis had actually been the early warning system that could have prevented the crisis entirely. Colonel Vasquez reviewed the timeline of events with the methodical precision of a commander conducting a thorough after-action analysis. Sergeant Petrov identified suspicious communication patterns on Thursday morning. She warned of coordinated operational planning with a 72-hour timeline. The attacks occurred 57 hours later, exactly within the parameters she predicted. The mathematical precision of Sofia's threat assessment was devastating in its implications. Her linguistic analysis hadn't just been correct, it had been accurate to within hours about timing, locations, and tactical methods. The specialist nobody had wanted had provided intelligence that could have prevented the entire crisis if anyone had been willing to listen. Captain Webb finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of professional humility that comes from acknowledging serious errors in judgment. Colonel, I owe Sergeant Petrov and this command a formal apology. My dismissal of her analytical methods was based on institutional bias rather than professional assessment. Her expertise should have been integrated into our intelligence procedures from the beginning. The apology was professional and complete, but Sofia could see that it carried personal cost. Webb's reputation as a decisive leader had been undermined by his failure to recognize and utilize available expertise when it mattered most. His career would recover, but his judgment would forever be questioned by those who remembered how close his prejudice had come to causing disaster. Major Chun, who had initially validated Sofia's expertise during his earlier visit, provided the broader context that everyone needed to understand. Sergeant Petrov's linguistic methodology is being adopted by intelligence divisions across multiple commands. Her analysis techniques are being incorporated into training curricula for intelligence specialists throughout the Army. The institutional recognition was gratifying, but Sofia felt most satisfied by the change in her immediate working environment. Officers who had dismissed her expertise for months now approached her desk with questions about linguistic analysis, cultural interpretation, and communication pattern recognition. Her detailed reports, previously skimmed and filed away, were now studied carefully and integrated into strategic planning. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation was personal, rather than professional. Lieutenant Hassan approached Sofia after the debriefing with an expression of genuine respect and collegial warmth that had been absent during the months of Sofia's professional isolation. Sofia, Hassan said, using her first name with natural familiarity, I want you to know how sorry I am that I didn't support you more strongly when you were being dismissed. Your expertise was obvious to anyone who took the time to understand it. Sofia appreciated the apology, but she also understood the institutional pressures that had contributed to her isolation. Zara, we all have to work within the systems we're given. The important thing is that we learn something that will help us do better in the future. As the debriefing concluded and personnel began returning to their normal duties, Sofia found herself approached by colleagues who wanted to understand her analytical methods, learn about linguistic pattern recognition, and integrate cultural analysis into their own professional development. The transformation was complete from institutional outcast to recognized expert, whose methods would influence intelligence operations far beyond Fort Blackwater. That evening, Sofia called her cousin Maria to share the news of her professional vindication. The conversation was emotional and gratifying, but what satisfied Sofia most was knowing that her grandmother's wisdom about the power of linguistic expertise had been proven correct in the most dramatic way possible. Sofia had saved 19 American lives not despite her accent and cultural background, but because of the unique expertise that her diverse linguistic heritage had provided. Her difference hadn't been a weakness to overcome, it had been a strength to celebrate. 2 years after the rescue operation that changed everything, Captain Sofia Petrov stood before a packed auditorium at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. Her presentation, titled Multilingual Intelligence Analysis in Counterterrorism Operations, had drawn an audience of military linguists, intelligence officers, and senior command personnel from across the armed forces. The woman who had once been mocked for her thick accent was now teaching others how linguistic diversity could save lives. Effective multilingual intelligence analysis, Sofia explained to the attentive audience, her accent still present, but now heard as a mark of expertise rather than inadequacy, requires understanding that language patterns reveal operational intelligence that conventional analysis often misses. Cultural context isn't academic theory, it's tactical intelligence that can determine mission success or failure. In the front row sat Colonel Elena Vasquez, now serving as the Director of Intelligence Operations for the Department of Defense. Beside her, Major David Chun took notes on Sofia's presentation, preparing to implement her methodologies across intelligence commands throughout the Pacific Theater. The validation that had begun in a crisis at Fort Blackwater had evolved into institutional transformation across the entire military intelligence community. The audience listened with the focused attention of professionals who understood that Sofia's expertise had been proven under the most demanding circumstances possible. Her rescue of 19 American personnel had become a case study taught at military academies, intelligence schools, and leadership development programs. But more importantly, her analytical methods had prevented dozens of similar crises by providing early warning intelligence that conventional analysis had missed. After her presentation, Sofia was approached by Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, her former captain who had received his own promotion, partly due to his eventual recognition and integration of multilingual intelligence capabilities within his command structure. The transformation in their professional relationship represented the broader institutional changes that Sofia's expertise had catalyzed. Captain Petrov, Webb said, extending his hand with genuine respect, your presentation was outstanding. I wanted you to know that the analytical protocols you developed are now standard procedure across my entire intelligence division. We haven't missed a major threat indicator since implementing your methodologies. Sofia accepted the compliment graciously, understanding that Webb's acknowledgement represented not just personal growth but institutional learning. Colonel, the important thing is that we're saving lives by utilizing all available expertise, regardless of where that expertise comes from or how it sounds when it's delivered. The reference to accent and linguistic diversity was subtle but clear. Sofia's success had influenced military culture beyond intelligence analysis, contributing to broader recognition that effectiveness matters more than conformity, that diverse perspectives strengthen rather than weaken operational capabilities. Later that day, Sofia received a call from Major Hassan, now serving as the senior intelligence officer at Fort Blackwater. The friendship that had developed from their shared experience during the crisis had evolved into a professional partnership that had influenced intelligence operations across multiple commands. "Sofia," Hassan said over the video call, "I wanted to update you on the latest network gamma developments. Using your analytical framework, we've identified and disrupted 3 separate terrorist operations in the past 6 months. Your methodologies are literally saving lives on a regular basis." The ongoing impact of Sofia's work provided deep professional satisfaction, but what meant most to her was knowing that other linguists and cultural analysts were no longer facing the isolation and dismissal that had characterized her early military experience. Her success had opened doors for specialists whose expertise had previously been undervalued due to accent, background, or unconventional analytical approaches. Sofia's influence extended beyond tactical operations into strategic policy development. Her analysis of terrorist communication networks had contributed to international intelligence sharing agreements, helped develop counter-terrorism protocols for allied nations, and influenced diplomatic strategies for regions where linguistic and cultural expertise provided crucial insights into political and security developments. The phone in her office rang with a call from the Pentagon. General Patricia Davidson, the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, was personally requesting Sofia's assessment of communication intercepts from a developing crisis in Eastern Europe. The request represented the ultimate professional vindication, senior leadership seeking her expertise, not as a last resort during crisis, but as a primary resource for preventing crisis. "Captain Petrov," General Davidson said, "we have multilingual communications from the Ukraine region that require your level of analytical expertise. The patterns are complex, and we need someone who can decode not just the content, but the strategic implications of linguistic choices and cultural references." Sofia accepted the assignment with the professional confidence that had replaced the uncertainty and isolation of her early career. Her expertise was now sought after rather than dismissed, valued rather than mocked, and integrated into decision-making processes at the highest levels of military and intelligence operations. That evening, Sofia called her grandmother's sister in Romania, sharing news of her continued success and the impact her work was having on military operations worldwide. The conversation was conducted in Romanian, English, and fragments of other languages that had shaped Sofia's multicultural identity, the same linguistic diversity that had once marked her as an outsider, but now defined her as an expert. "Your grandmother would be so proud," her great-aunt said in accented English that reminded Sofia of her own linguistic journey. "She always said that speaking many languages makes you powerful, not weak. She always said that understanding different cultures makes you valuable, not strange." As Sofia ended the call and prepared for another day of intelligence analysis that would influence operations across multiple continents, she reflected on the transformation that had begun with mock treasure maps and evolved into institutional change throughout the military intelligence community. The lesson of her journey wasn't just about linguistic expertise or cultural analysis. It was about the value of diverse perspectives in solving complex problems, the importance of listening to voices that sound different, and the recognition that strength comes from embracing rather than suppressing the qualities that make individuals unique. Sofia Petrov had proven that accents don't indicate intelligence, that being different doesn't mean being less capable, and that sometimes the most valuable expertise comes from the most unexpected sources. Her legacy would continue in every multilingual analyst who felt confident rather than ashamed of their diverse background, in every intelligence operation that valued cultural context over simple translation, and in every military leader who understood that effectiveness matters more than conformity. The specialist nobody had wanted had become the expert everyone needed, and her influence would save lives for years to come. Sofia's accent had become her signature strength, and her story had become inspiration for anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.